So when I was doing my one-man play, Off the Meter, about 40 years driving a yellow cab in New York City at the Irish Repertory Theater, every night when the show was over, I'd go into the lobby and the audience members would come up and they said, "You ever think about doing the Moth?" Now, I love the Moth. I've been listening to it for 20 years. It's the best storytellers, not only in this country, but around the world. So when the run ended, I said, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot. So I went to the Bell House in Brooklyn, where they had an open mic. I got there early, which was a mistake, and I'll tell you why later. So I go in there, and what I was amazed was the crowd was very young, and there was a lot of drinking going on. So when they were called up, the stories were horrible. People had to be pulled off the stage. I couldn't believe how did they produce this hour of that. But there was a running thread that went through the people telling the stories. Most of the guys are 24 to 26, and they would get up and they would start their story. I live in my mother's basement in Brooklyn. I smoke weed, I drink beer, and I play video games. Then the women would get up, 24 to 25. My boyfriend lives in a basement. He smokes weed, he drinks beer, and plays video games. There's no life experience. So I don't want to go old school on these ones, but when I hit 18, you were drafted. Our country sent you around the world to kill someone. You came back, you got married, you had 2 kids, you got divorced. By 25 or 25, you were a raging alcoholic. You had stories to tell, not like these kids today. So, my name didn't get picked out that night, so I was leaving. I said, you know what, I'm going to give it another shot. So there was an open mic at Housing Works down in Soho. So I made sure I went late because I saw the way the system worked. You put your name into the hat. When I got to the Bell House, I was at the bottom. I went there early. So I made sure I was the last guy, that my name was at the top, because people were picking him out. So the MC gets up and he goes, all right, here's how the stories are going to be tonight. And he goes, we're against hate speech. Yeah, I'm down with that. He goes, we don't want any phobias, claustrophobia, transphobia. He did about 20 phobias. I didn't know what they were, but I knew I qualified for about half of them. And then he said, if you're going to tell a story, please do not tell a story about another ethnic group. Only tell the story about the ethnic group that you belong to. I'm going, you gotta be kidding me. I'm born and raised in New York. How can I possibly tell a story without a Puerto Rican guy, an Italian guy, a Jewish guy, an American guy? I said, I would be mute. I said, this is not Utah. We're not all Mormons here in New York. We gotta talk about other ethnic groups. So now I'm panicking a little bit. My name gets pulled out. I go up. So I tell a story about how the Amazing Race picked me, and I went with my friend Seth Goldman from Brooklyn, a Jewish guy who was speaking Yiddish, and I told the story. And you know what? The snowflakes, they didn't melt. And they gave me a high score. So at that part of the night, I had the highest score of the night, the storytelling. So as the night goes on, it's going on, and I'm leading. So the last guy gets up, and he starts talking about his dog, how he loved his dog, and his dog was dying, and that he had to go to the vet and see what was going to happen. The dog was dying, and I'm going, God, if this dog dies, I'm fucked. And you know what? The dog died, everybody's crying, he got the highest score, I lost. I said, all right, listen, this Moth is not for me. So I leave, I forget about the Moth. So this January, I'm doing my play at Theater 80 down at St. Mark's Place. And the same thing is happening again. The show ends, I go into the lobby, audience members are coming up and they're going, listen, you ever think about doing the Moth? So this woman comes up to me and she goes, listen, did you ever think about doing the Moth? I said, let me tell you something, fuck the Moth. And unless you're doing a story about dying dogs, you're not getting off of the Moth. So she reaches into her pocketbook and she hands me a card. And it says, The Moth, Artistic Director, Catherine Burns. I'm going, humna, humna, humna. I bribe a dust. I said, listen, I'm so sorry. I love the Moth, but I just don't do dying animals, man. So she goes to me, don't worry. You don't have to do a dying dog. I'm going to get you onto the Moth. So in June, they invited me to a story slam at the Music Hall in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. It's packed. 300 people are there. It's all young people. I go up to the green room, and I have to sign a release. Now, I've signed releases before. I was an extra in Boardwalk Empire, so I knew what to do. But this was a Moth release. So I signed my name, the address, and they looked down and they said, "What's your pronoun?" And I'm looking at it, and I'm, you know what? I don't see schmuck, so I'm not doing that. I leave it blank. I get down to the next one. How do you want to be identified? I'm like, oh my God. There was about 50 categories. Now, I know I don't get out much at night, but what the fuck is going on in the dating scene here in New York City? I didn't qualify for any of that. Does that make me weird? So I left it blank. So I go downstairs, they have me onto the stage, I tell the story about the amazing race, I get invited to the next level, which is the main stage. So now this fall, when you're listening to NPR, and the Moth Radio Hour comes up, and you hear an introduction for a yellow cab driver from Queens, now you know the rest of the story.